Then, once you've gone through your negative consequences, of course.
The issue of stakeholders, could you elaborate a bit more on what that means, like even if it is all part of the others, so we can understand how, because you're probably going to use this term again.
Yeah.
No, I understand what I mean. I'm saying for everyone here is the...
Okay. So the stakeholders, and remember this is 101 at the moment. I haven't even got into principles yet. This is the bog standard first stop, shorn of principles. The stakeholders, any group, individual or institution or structure that is affected by this given proposal. Now, the very simple way to think of this is go right from the top, which is all of humanity. So an environment motion, for example, is you're likely to say, look, the globe is affected by this. And then you go down in incremental steps. Now, it's quite obvious that Turkey and the EU motion does not affect, unless you're really going to make a stretch, the whole globe. But when you go down a level, you're likely to hit an institution like the United Nations. And then you keep on going down step by step. You should be able to do this intuitively. Those steps in this case would be, right, the European Union is bigger than Turkey. Then you have, so the European Union as an institution is very high up. You then have the constituent country members, which is a separate stakeholder to the European Union, because members have got different priorities as opposed to the actual institution of the EU. Because when you talk about the EU, you're talking about the Commission, you're talking about voting structures, you're potentially talking about its foreign policy. When you're talking about member states, you're talking about France or Germany or Austria and what they want as policies, their democratically stated aims and goals. You have Turkey at that point as a stakeholder, and then from Turkey we derive another set of stakeholders, which are the region around, countries around Turkey. If you then go lower than that, you've got groups within these countries potentially affected by this. So that might be the labour market within these countries, how that is affected, companies within these countries who might want to be able to have access to different types of labour, pressure groups potentially, or certainly church. So what the church might want to say about this, or what Islam might want to say about this. Whether you place that as a stakeholder below the state or above the state is not important, but I tend to get to that after the state, because I'm an atheist, and so I place it very much beneath the state. You might want to place it above. This goes all the way down to, in some debates, the family, and then within the family, the constituent parts of that family, and then you finally get to the individual. And at the individual, quite often, you start talking about rights of individuals. But basically, your stakeholder analysis is your attempt to say, very quickly in your mind, and with your partner when you sit down at the beginning of any debate, the first two things you should be asking yourself, what is this debate about? What are the big principles here? And then, who the fuck is affected by this? Who is this going to change the life of? Who, if this were to be allowed, if this proposition were to stand, would be affected, and then you say, would that effect be negative or positive? And then whichever side you fall on, obviously you concentrate on that side of the debate. Is that a clear enough explication of a stakeholder? Okay. So, in the very simple op case, we have your problems with the mechanism, or your problems with this won't happen in the real world. You then have your second step, which is, what are the consequences of this going to be? And then finally, you have your, okay, and what are the alternatives to this? Because you do want to say, we appreciate you bringing this. Obviously, there is an issue here, but what are the alternatives? Either you say the status quo is absolutely fine. That is actually an alternative. You say, look, the status quo offers us a Turkey with whom we can trade, a Turkey with whom we have military alliance, a Turkey with whom we have diplomatic engagement, and a Turkey who has power within the United Nations. We don't believe that Turkey and the European Union works because they will flood our labour market, as we said in our first argument. We believe that Turkey is culturally completely different, and we also believe that the European Union was not built for that reason. Okay. Now this is where we start moving into more complex ops. That is the really obvious, all about the practicalities, all about the real world, apart from that last thing I said. This is where it starts to get more interesting for you as opposition teams. You have a decision at the start of a debate as to whether you're going to engage with the proposition on principle grounds, or on practical grounds, or on both. So in this one, I could just go, and it would be quite a good op to simply say, we think that the labour market will be ruined by this. This is after you've said it's not going to work. We think that Turkey's population is uneducated. We think that there will be border problems because they can't secure their border. And so how will we have any kind of one, security arrangement, and two, how will we ensure that the free movement of labour, which is already a problem with Turkey, won't become more of a problem because there are people coming in from Iran, Iraq, Syria, because already we know that their borders are porous. And we also don't think that if you let in Turkey, you will ever be able to get the Cyprus issue solved, the Armenian genocide issue solved, whatever. Purely practical. But what you haven't done is engaged on any principle level what they say. The principle level is going to be perhaps the following. One, when do we admit countries into the European Union? Under what conditions do we do that? Why have we set those conditions? So what is the European Union, essentially? And that's where you might say, rather than just being too big and too poor, that Turkey is too Muslim, and that this is about the EU as a Christian club, which is how many people within the EU view it. You may want to talk about leverage. So rather than just saying, well, you'll never be able to solve the Cyprus or the Armenian issues, you may want to talk about what do negotiations give us, rather than immediate entry. Negotiations give you leverage. And so you go, rather than saying, this isn't going to work, you start talking about what negotiations actually are and when they are useful. Now, the first one, where you purely go on practicalities, you might win. But if first proposition have brought in a case, and so you're preparing your case, and if you prepare it on pure practicalities, and propositions stand up and bring you this very principled case about, actually, we have a duty to Turkey that is derived from a shared history that we have, or that the European Union has a duty to act as a bridge at a time when there is a clash of civilizations, and that Turkey offers an opportunity to bridge that, and here's why. If you stand up and give a purely practical response to that, it might be that the two teams are not clashing. Now, this was a massive debate that we had in the car on the way down. What is the correct strategy for you to pursue at that point? Before I go to that, are there any questions at this point? Because very soon I'm going to start asking your opinions on this. Okay. So, if you can prepare a case in opposition to a real world, not magic land motion, so a real world motion like Turkey, I would advise you strategically to go beyond that mere practicalities argument and to have this mix of, here are the principles which we stand by, here is why we think anyway in the real world this isn't going to work, and here are the negative consequences that derive from your actions, both because in the real world we just don't think they work, but also because they damage these set of principles which we hold dear. Because you lose your ability to negotiate. Because you lose what the European Union should be. Why might that strategically be, or in your view, is that, for example, a correct strategy? Is that the kind of strategy that you already pursue as teams? Anyone can answer this. Okay. If you're not going to answer in that case, I'm going to give you another motion, and I'm going to ask you 2 minutes to come back to me with what you think the op is likely to be. Sorry, Michael, you've heard this one on the way down. This House would ban all advertising.
I have a good idea.
Okay. This House would ban all advertising. First of all, identify whether this is real world or magic world. Is this magic land?